Greetings, travelers. A warning for the episode ahead. This episode will be entirely about the use of fantasy weapons in a fantasy context, so if you're sensitive to talk about violence and weapons and swords and things like that, I would suggest you turn back now and maybe check out a different episode on our page. If you're still here, please enjoy the show.
I still hate her. Sorry, Jordan.
Gee, thanks.
Yeah, she's growing on me a little bit. I think
Levi, don't fall in love. Don't fall in love with the girl that announces the recording.
I should call her.
She's kind of a baddie, though.
What?
Does anybody else?
You're not allowed to say that. You don't like her.
That's why it's a love-hate relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan, you having a stroke?
No, my apartment was recently on fire.
Huh?
Come again?
So this week I tried to make garlic bread in my microwave and failed epically. Here's the funny thing is, I'm an excellent cook and I'm a very good baker. So if I would have made the garlic bread like baked bread, it would have been fine. But by me putting garlic bread in the microwave, I lit the microwave on fire.
It's like the opposite of that man steps on a rake meme.
How? I just want to know, how did the garlic bread? What did you do that caused fire?
I put it in the microwave and forgot it was in the microwave and walked away.
How long did you leave the garlic bread in the microwave for?
This
that it
is
lit
not
on fire.
You're not the first person that asked that question. It's actually not as long as you would think. It was only in there for 3 minutes.
What is the burning point of garlic bread?
I think it's around.
Is a while to forget something in the microwave, though.
Well, it is. No, the microwave was set for 3 minutes. That's the thing. People, whenever I tell people this, they're like, "Oh, what did you leave it in there for 15 minutes?" I'm like, "No, it happened really quick."
Oh my god!
So there's Californian wildfires, and then there's Ohio and garlic bread fires. It's very fast.
California in real life.
Yeah, now my apartment, the apartment smells better. The apartment no longer smells entirely like burnt bread, but my kitchen still smells atrocious.
Does it have the garlic part or is it just bread?
What do you mean?
Does it smell like garlic bread or just bread?
It smells like fire, Levi.
Well,
burnt bread.
I will send you the picture and you can post it on Twitter as a promotion for this episode, the picture of the charcoal briquette that came out of my microwave.
All right. Wonderful.
Well, before we start this episode, Jordan, make sure you throw a garlic bread in the microwave and we'll get back to it at some point. We won't forget.
No.
Yeah,
No.
Didn't you say you had like some rolls in the oven or something like 15 minutes ago?
Wait, Jordan, what's that coming next? Hey everybody, welcome to the Nat 1 podcast, aka Nope, because nope, you're not gonna want to hear what we're about to have to say. I'm Pertusik.
I'm Levi.
And I'm Jordan. No, I would never burn bread that I actually bake. I'm very good at baking.
The video watchers are gonna appreciate that one. Editing Jordan?
Gonna kill you.
I gotta say, that was still really funny, even though I knew about it already. Producer, what's this week's topic of discussion?
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the Nat 1 podcast.
What is this? What are you doing? Was this a little?
Did you forget our intro?
No, he's doing a weird like song thing with it.
Yeah, I'm popping and locking, dude.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You've never done that. Don't do this. Don't gaslight me. Don't pretend that he's not doing it.
This is the intro. I don't know what you're talking about.
We've never done the little musical bit with it that he's doing right now.
What musical bit?
Don't make fun of my singing.
Introduce the topic.
Yeah, so the topic for this week is going to be we're going to be talking about weapons. Most specifically, the weapons available in official 5e sourcebook stuff. Even more specifically, talking about just like weapon types, like greatsword, longsword. But we might expand out and start talking about cooler things.
Homebrew?
Yeah.
Homebrew? I want to talk about the ball and chain. That's why I'm asking if we can talk about homebrew.
We'll get to that eventually. We can also talk about our favorite fictional weapons in general. Like I'm sure we'll probably want to bring up guns. Those are pretty cool fictional. I literally couldn't think of a fictional weapon.
I mean, most weapons aren't really fictional though.
I was trying to think of the one from Halo. The
Energy sword?
yes, I couldn't think of the name. I
You mean
couldn't.
lightsaber?
No, that's
It's not
copyright.
though. They're different. Actually, they're really different.
They actually
from
are
one
very
another.
different. Yeah.
Flashlight of death.
But like even I mean the energy sword's probably the most original one because the lightsaber is still grounded in being a sword. The energy sword, ironically, is the least like sword looking thing.
Yeah. It's like
Uh,
claws, pretty much.
no.
Anyway, so let's start talking about weapons. So, without starting to get into favorites, least favorites, all that, what are your guys' takes on the current existing 5e weapon system? How do you feel about it? What's your experience with it?
Jordan, do you want to start or should I start?
You probably have more experience with using weapons than I do because I only recently started using weapons in D&D because for the longest time I was straight casting because it's a fantasy game. Why am I going to use a sword when I can use fucking magic? But then I was able to hit things and it was better. So I started using weapons.
Well, I'm going to say way too simple. Way too simple. And because literally all it is depending on your starting class, you either have the weapon you need and are done and never change your weapon ever again unless you get a magic version of it that's better, or you start as like, I don't know, a monk that has like daggers, and then you're like, okay, but now I'm gonna get short swords instead, so I upgrade from a D4 to a D6. It's way too simple of a system, and there should be more versatility. And also, like coming from a standpoint of someone who loves like historical weapons and is an enthusiast of them, a short sword and a long sword are not going to hurt someone different if you're stabbing them with it. They're going to hurt someone. They're going to hurt someone the same, so they shouldn't have different damage dies. They should have different properties. There should be an expansive list of properties and different advantages to using certain weapons, but they should all do roughly the same amount of damage. I can understand differences for like blunt weapons, because the bigger it is, the more weight it has. Yeah, that makes more sense. It'll do more damage. But stuff like swords, no, it doesn't make much sense. I could excuse like great swords versus long swords, but D&D long swords aren't really long swords. They're what are called arming swords, which are a sword that you wield with one hand. You can two-hand long swords in D&D, but who fucking two-hands a long sword? You're gonna get a great sword if you're gonna use a sword with two hands. You're not gonna use a long sword. So yeah, pretty much what a long sword is it's a glorified arming sword in D&D, and yeah, it's not gonna be any different than a short sword, and a long sword are not gonna be different from each other in terms of how they hurt someone, and I don't know why they are.
Now, how do you feel about longbow, shortbow, which obviously has different damage die?
I forget what are the two damage dies for them? Is longbow D8, shortbow D6?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
That sounds
honestly
right.
Hot take, a longbow should be like a D10 or 2D6, and a shortbow should be like a D8.
Oh, you want them both buffed?
Yes, because historically the longbow was one of the most powerful weapons of the medieval period that a individual could use. Longbows were terrifying, like absolutely there's a reason Britain, which well at the time England, this backwater country, not a backwater. England wasn't a backwater, but it was definitely not as developed as France. France is the reason all of the medieval stereotypes exist. Knights in shining armor, chivalry, like plate armor, chainmail armor, the Crusades. The French did all that. They were the medieval people. And England was over here like, we got some of that medieval stuff from that time that French people came over here and conquered us, and now we have French people as our kings. So we have some of that, but for the most part, we don't. So what do we got instead? We got this long shaft of wood that is pretty bendy.
That's what she said.
And then the British managed to annex like 3/4 of France in a time period leading up to the 100 Years' War, and is also parts of the 100 Years' War, because their bows, their longbow, the English longbow was just so freaking amazing in medieval warfare. And there right now there's actually a hot debate going on in historical societies about was the English longbow capable of piercing plate armor or not? And it's like really heated. There are people that are on both sides that are like, no, it couldn't. Plate armor's invincible and nothing can pierce it. That's why everyone always had to go for the weak points in between the pieces of the armor. And then there's people that are like, there are historical documents that say that the arrows pierced the armor.
Well, and that's why you just go for bludgeoning damage, because if you dent it and they can't get out of it, then they die.
Yeah, that too. But then also there's stuff like people have literally done tests in the modern day where they've tried to recreate it and it hasn't pierced the armor. But then again, there's primary sources that are like, no, it pierced the armor. It definitely did. So yeah, anyways, long story short, longbows are terrifying and should be more powerful because they are one of the strongest medieval forms of weaponry without magic that there can be.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That one person can hold.
That's the historical context of the weapon. I'm not sure how much worse that would be mechanically. It would just give a buff to anyone that uses a longbow, which is only people that have martial proficiency.
Which is pretty much rangers. That's your rangers. And fighters, maybe.
Yeah. Not a lot of barbarians go in range.
Yeah, no. So what I'm saying here is rangers who have to stack pretty heavily to do damage, like decent damage, they gotta fit into a niche. It would be a good buff for them, I think, just to have the longbow do more damage.
Maybe.
I actually have a thing for damage though. Like
not even that much of a buff, because it's just adding an extra 20% chance that you could get 1 or 2 higher damage than normal.
True.
Mm-hmm.
And same for the short bow.
What you were saying, Jordan?
Oh, I actually have a bone to pick with like weapons damage, because like I've recently started using weapons because the first like serious character that I played, I forgot to give weapons proficiencies because it was a homebrew subclass and I'm a dumbass. So Atlas did not have weapons proficiencies that clerics usually have because I forgot to add them. Anyway, now after playing with weapons, I think that after like a certain point, proficiency bonus should be added to weapon damage. Because I feel like as you get better with a weapon, you should be able to hurt more, because then you know like the way to get in those chinks in the armor and like how to hit people more so that it does more damage. Because it kind of sucks that like if you're using the same short sword that you were using since level 1, sure you get 3 attacks, but that's 3d6 whoop-de-fucking do compared to like what 5d10 for inflict wounds level 2.
Yeah.
There's a whole martial caster disparity that I don't think there's a single simple fix for. I know people have talked before about the same thing you're talking about, and they're always like, but the fighter can attack 8 times in a turn. That's 8 times 6, which is 48. I can't handle that.
Well, I mean, if you had the situation that we had the other night when we were playing, where no one was rolling anywhere near their max damage or even hitting, like it sucks. The whatever I did that I rolled 5. It was 5d6 or 66, and I rolled all ones except for one which was a 2.
Yeah.
So like I could have done a ridiculous amount of like a chunk of damage, but instead I did 7 damage.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what Wizards is doing at all, and I'm not sure where I fit on when I think about the way to do that, because if you do add proficiency for damage, all the way from early levels to high levels, you're going to have more guaranteed damage output. Like a low character, if they attack twice, if you have a level 5 character and they attack twice, they're going to be able to do at least 8 damage, but at most, depending on their weapon, like 13 to 21 damage.
Yeah.
But a simple fix for that is just increasing HP for monsters. So it's really just having healthier monsters and having more damage, or having not healthier monsters and more damage and things die quicker.
Or I mean, I feel like you could even caveat that, like if you roll above a certain number, like not like kind of like the crit and soft crit rules, but like if you get into the 20, like if you go past 22, you add your proficiency to your damage, because then it still technically works, and you're more likely to roll those higher numbers as you get higher level, because your bonuses get better and your stats get better and your proficiency goes up. So I feel like it still scales, but it offers you a little bit more in like assured damage. Because that's the other thing, like, it kind of feels cheap if you roll a 25, and, like, that's really, really good. But, yeah, it does 6 damage.
True.
Like, roll the 25.
You know what? That seems like a very good idea for a homebrew subclass.
That is also the thing that I do want to say, though.
Mhm.
In what context are you bringing up this complaint, Jordan? Because as a paladin main, I'm over here with a +4 to strength doing a minimum of 5 damage on each hit, no matter what. So I feel like it's a good spot for me. I feel like that's okay that my minimum is at least 5 damage and I get 2 attacks per round. That's a minimum of 10. If I had a smite, a minimum of 12. No, a minimum of 14 if I use only a first level smite, so on and so forth. So do you not like this because of your experience as Atlas with melee weapons or your experience as Arlo with melee weapons?
Kind of, to be fair, Arlo hasn't gotten her second attack yet because she's still only level 3 barbarian. So that my opinion may change once she can do like 2 horrifying rounds of damage with ball and chain.
What I'm saying is perhaps the reason that you might not like it as much is because you're not a dedicated like melee. So you haven't pumped into your melee damage stat. Because I'm a paladin, so I have a +4 in strength. Because I know I'm going to be fighting things and hitting things, and I need that. So for me, I don't feel like that's as big of a complaint from my experience.
Yeah, I can understand that.
I think the higher up you get, because like, yeah, getting towards the end of the game where you're level 15 and you have a +5 to strength or dex, and you're getting a minimum of, if you have 1 attack, that's a minimum of 6 damage. That's pretty cruddy, but also usually whatever. If you're a rogue, you're gonna hopefully be smart enough to try to use your sneak, which at that level you're gonna get like, I don't even know how many because I haven't played a rogue.
It goes up?
Tell me right now. Tell me right now how many sneak dice you get.
I forget, what's the sneak die again?
What level?
15.
15. If you're 15 levels a rogue, that gives you, I believe, 66 or 76 sneak damage on top of what you normally have.
Yeah. So you're going to be getting a minimum, which is really bad if you roll the minimum on 76.
Which is what happened the other night.
7 plus 5, which is 12, plus at least 1 from the damage die of the weapon, which is 13 damage minimum, which for a rogue, that's pretty bad because they only get 1 attack. So it is bad, but it's still also like you're doing double digits no matter what. So I think there is, I think there is some weight to the current system, although it definitely needs revised.
I'm thinking, well, first off, we always got to be careful that you don't step on the toes of other classes, because there were plenty of times where I was playing my rogue and my damage was getting matched by our paladin, which always frustrated me to a great extent, because I was playing an assassin rogue and my whole thing was doing the big pop damage. We've had this discussion many times.
Yeah.
For a reference for the viewers and listeners, love and or hate and love respectively. I could do a lot of damage as a rogue assassin, but our paladin could do about the same damage with smites and the weapon that she had, while also being able to cast spells, wear heavy armor, and heal herself a great amount, which started frustrating me because I couldn't do any of that and she could still match my damage. So when designing things, you always have to keep careful that you're not stepping on toes.
Yeah.
Because at first I was thinking, that's a cool idea, Jordan. We could make it into a subclass that can do that, but then it just becomes more roguelike, and you're just going to be matching what the rogue does, but is a different class, which might insult the rogue, or it might just be people, it might be like Arcane Archer, where people are like, why would you ever play that when you could just play a ranger? And people would be like, why would you ever play that fighter when you could just play a rogue? I still like the idea. A lot of people complain online, I've noticed, that the fighter kind of overreaches its own class, where there's a lot of fighter subclasses or fighter features that feel like they'd be better fit as a whole nother class, or as part of barbarian or part of something else. I wonder if a good way to separate, instead of giving fighter all those extra attacks that they have, give those to the barbarian, because I think barbarians really feel like they're the type that would attack like crazy all the time.
I feel like you should get an extra attack if you're raging, or like there should be something like, because when I think rage, I think frenzied. So like I feel like rage isn't as fleshed out as it should be.
No, definitely not.
I think it would be fair to say that barbarians would get the 4 attacks that fighters also get. I mean, they already do get 3 attacks. They are the second most attacky class action. But they should get the 4 attacks that the fighter gets. And then like it could be a very high level barbarian ability that when you're raging, yeah, you get another attack. So you get 5 attacks as a barbarian while you're raging. That could be that could be a good addition. Like that could be a specific barbarian subclass thing where it's like all about having as many attacks as possible in the action economy or something like that. I don't know.
Perhaps. I also think a good trade-off that could happen, obviously isn't it currently existing, but an idea, this is all of us just spitballing, so don't roast us too hard in the comments. A trade-off for giving the barbarian the more attacks instead of the fighter, give the fighter what Jordan's talking about. Once you get to like level 15 or 17 fighter, add your proficiency to your damage because you're a honed, trained fighter.
Yeah.
That I think is the trade-off. Barbarians attack more because they're crazy and weird and they're Charlie. But but
fighters get their proficiency to their damage
because they're more trained and honed.
There you go.
I think that's a great trade-off for actual whole class restructuring. And it's not that much either. It's not like a huge, completely change how the class works thing either. It's a slight change to both. This is why we have these conversations, because they're cool and we learn cool, smart new things.
Yeah.
Back to all weapons, though. So we talked about our experience with weapons. I should mention my experience with weapons. So the first big campaign we played, where we played by the rules mostly, I played a rogue, 17 levels rogue, 3 levels barbarian. I took the 3 levels early because my survivability was doo-doo fart. And I needed the rage to survive. It saved me many times, so I don't regret it. And I know there's a lot of people that don't like the assassin rogue, but that's a conversation for another day. As an assassin rogue, I definitely felt the 1 attack per turn. Oh my gosh, that was awful.
Yeah, I remember there was a specific I don't remember the context for the situation, but I remember there being a combat we did where you got really frustrated because like you missed an attack and you were like, all right, that's my entire turn.
Yeah, because you just can't do anything as a rogue. And I mean, like, I guess that's kind of this point, especially the point for an assassin. But as a player playing the assassin rogue, it just feels so frustrating. I wish there was just a way to boost your ability to hit other than advantage. I would often get the advantage. Doesn't help you much if you roll a 2 and a 3. I wish there was a static bonus. Because the thing was, I only got advantage as a normal assassin rogue. I only got it when I went before whatever else went, right? And that only happens once per combat. It doesn't happen all the time for the targets. It only happens at the beginning. So if I had, instead of advantage on anything that hasn't gone, give me like a +5 or a +10, or it scales even. And that way my first attack always hits. But instead I get advantage. Advantage doesn't help me all that much to hit, except for it gives me sneak. However, I did kind of break the build because I had reckless attack as a barbarian, so I got myself advantage all the time. I don't know how you want to balance that. Just say if you go before a creature, give it +5, not if you have advantage, this, that, or the other. But I used a longsword that had the proficiency, had the ability to give me sneak. It had the finesse property.
Yep.
So I was able to use it. And that was nice having a D8. I know a lot of rogues are used to only be able to do D6s and D4s. Heart goes out to all you D4 players out there.
I kind of feel that singular attack frustration that, like, it's not technically a weapon, but with cleric especially, if you blow like an 8th level spell slot on something that's gonna be really cool, but then it passes the save or like you fail the roll, it's like, well, shit, I have 2 of those, so.
Which is why I really enjoy the homebrew spell save DC rule we use.
Yeah, same.
Which is just a copy paste of the 3.5 rule, which is you add the spell level to the DC as well. So it doesn't make it so that a living person, a normal, well, not normal because they're, wizards and shit. But a spellcaster's biggest DC they can have at 20th level is 19. 19. It's not even more than what you can naturally roll on a D20. No, it's 19.
19.
You can very much conceivably roll in 19.
Literally anyone has a 5% chance of passing it normally.
10.
10? Oh yeah, because it meets and succeeds. 10% chance of passing it normally without if they just have a flat 0 to their roll.
Yeah.
Disregard. So yeah, I like it when you can, because it makes it feel meatier when you're a 20th level wizard and you cast a 9th level spell and the DC is 8 plus your proficiency plus your spellcast modifier plus the spell's level. Because then it's 19 plus 9. So the DC is 28.
Yeah.
Much
fun.
better.
Have fun. Try to dodge this, idiot.
Now, frankly, that was our experience, because I always felt while we were playing and reading through the rules and stuff that it was grossly unfair that players capped at 19 for their spell saves, and many monsters of very high CR would have like a
They
plus
don't.
11 to their
Yeah.
saves and stuff like that, or higher. It was so gross to play again. It made it to where spell save spells just were not takeable.
We just
you
wouldn't use
couldn't
them. Like there were some of us had them as like class features that were innate and built into the class, but like I remember there were a couple times where like Dylan and I would be debating on
Mhm.
spells and be like, oh, it's a save. There's no point in me casting this because it's 7th level, but it's a save, so they're gonna save.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why we changed and went with the 3-5 rule. Maybe other people in the comments, those of you listening at home and watching at home,
There are no watchers.
I
Love
see
you,
them.
hate you.
Please post in the comments your experience with spell saves, and if you think it would be stupid because you've had experiences that contradict ours or not. I'd love to hear your use cases for why it wouldn't be bad. That's not me being provocative. I actually genuinely would love to hear
Yeah.
what your experience is.
That also might be partially our experience because Levi likes to try to kill us, so that's also another.
Very hard combats.
That is no hate to Levi. We love Levi's combats, but they definitely put us through the
Do
ringer
you?
routinely.
Some of them I think you didn't. Some of them, there were a couple that I think genuinely were just like, you didn't like them.
The only
I'm trying to
unforgivable
think.
one is the gorilla demon.
I don't think there were any.
Yeah.
I don't
Bald
remember that.
girl.
I don't remember that combat, so I
remember.
don't know what you're referring to. But I do want to say, keeping on the topic of 3.5e superiority, this ties back in. This ties back in to the original topic of weapons, because in 3.5e the weapons are better. Why? Why, you ask? Why would the weapons be better?
Yeah.
Because it's similar to what I've been saying already, where a lot of them just have the same damage dice.
Mhm.
But some weapons are, not all weapons are created equal, we'll say that.
Mhm.
Where I don't think this is true for 3.5e, so don't kill me in the comments. This is just for example purposes. For example, great sword and a long sword have the same damage die. They both do, we'll say 2d6 for the sake of it. But a great sword does 3 times damage on a crit instead of 2 times damage on a
That's
crit.
right. I remember reading that.
And like there are 2 different forms of like small arms weaponry similar to a dagger, where one is just a dagger and it's normal, and then the other one does 1.5 times damage on a crit or 2 times damage on a crit. They had a lot of that in 3.5e, which gave you reason to be, and also like that. I'm gonna see if I can find a 3.5e weapons table that I can look at to explain some of this.
Okay, you look into that. I also gotta say, I have one major beef with the currently existing 5e weapon system. I agree with Levi that the weapons should deal similar damage and have just different effects, so that way you can flavor how you want. Maybe you really want to play a trident person, or you want to wield daggers, throwing daggers instead of arrows. There should be more room for people that want to play well while also playing with their own flavor, by not having such a drastic difference between the superiority of weapons.
Yeah.
I agree with that. That's not my biggest beef, though. My biggest beef is the spear. The spear in 5e makes me so mad, because the spear, Levi can attest to this, super huge and important historical weapon that's really superior almost across the board. It was, right?
The spear is pretty much the definitive weapon of every culture across the planet. It can be used for any form of warfare, and it is the king of medieval melee weaponry. Yes.
It's so cool. And while there are alternatives to the spear in the martials, like the glaive and the halberd, that deal 1d8 damage, the spear only deals 1d6 damage, and it's simple. And it just really frustrates me to my core that the spear does as much damage as a short sword, and that the martial version of the spear does 1d8 or 1d10 if you're
I will say, the spear should have better damage dice, but it should stay simple, because that was the reason why it was used so much throughout history.
Yeah.
Because it was very easy to understand how to use a spear.
Oh yeah, I'm with you on that.
You stab thing with spear. But also, just because you got the long. You can very easily keep things away from you when your pointy end is 4 feet from you.
Mhm.
It's a very, very important weapon throughout history. Yes.
Yes.
I do want to say also something that 3.5e did that I'm looking at now. Every weapon had a size category. Not like every weapon was in a size category. Every weapon could be a different size.
Mm.
From fine to colossal.
Whoa.
So it's based on the size of the creature it was designed for. So a fine greatsword is for like a pixie. It's a great sword. It's a great sword for their race. It's a great sword.
It's
A
toothpick.
medium great sword is the regular great sword, which does 2d6. A large great sword does 3d6. A huge one does 4d6. A gargantuan one does 6d6, and a colossal one does 8d6.
Damn.
Wow, colossal took a leap.
Yeah, it's what size category. So that could be something where it's like, when you guys kill a big demon creature and you're like, yeah, I want to take its greatsword. And I'm over here like, okay, it's a greatsword. It does 2d6. But actually, I could be like, oh, what size were they? Let me check and see. Oh, this one does 66 because they were huge. Also, you're medium, so how are you going to use it?
Very carefully.
See, I really like the idea of doing something like that using enlarge reduce.
Yeah.
But
Ooh.
unfortunately, as spell is written, rules as spell written, Roswa, as everyone knows it as, enlarge and reduce increases the damage by 1d4 only and reduces it by 1d4 only, respectively. It would be so much cooler if you just increased the damage die by 1, or decreased. Well, I guess you couldn't decrease by 1, but I don't know, if you had a small sword, you could at least decrease the die size. So if someone's wielding a short sword at you and reduce its size instead of doing a 1d6, now it does 1d4. I think that would be cooler.
Homebrew.
Yeah, so here's a couple of things that I think like this could add more. This is the stuff I was talking about. There's the critical damage table, which is there are some weapons that do more critical than others. So there's a weapon that can do regular double damage. There's weapons that do triple damage. There's weapons that, because there are things called double weapons, which have 2 heads that you attack with. So so it's like a spear that also has maybe like a mace head on the bottom of it.
Yeah.
It's like the Darth Maul lightsaber.
Yeah, you can do 2 attacks with it, and one of for double weapons, some of them have properties where one head does 3 times crit damage, one head does 4 times crit damage. They do different crit damages. There's weapons that can do 4 times crit damage. There's weapons that roll crits on 19 and 20s.
Yeah.
Weapons that roll crits on 18s and 20s, or 18 through 20s. Stuff like that. Actually, okay, here's the actual table. The table I was specifically looking for. So daggers in 3.5e crit on 19s and 20s.
That'd be a boon for a rogue.
Dagger punching. There's a dagger called a punching dagger, which does 3 times damage on a crit, but only crits on 20s. Also,
cool,
that's why it's called that, because regular daggers you could choose to do piercing or slashing damage with them. But punching daggers are like the ones that you put in between your fingers. And so they only do piercing damage.
Can I get one of those for Ren? That sounds awesome.
There are spiked gauntlets, which are the exact same thing.
No,
they're actually worse. They're worse than
fist?
punching. They're worse than punching daggers because they do the same damage, but only do 2 times damage on a critical hit and only do piercing damage. Light mace, which does a d6 and 2 times damage and bludgeoning. Sickles, which do a d6 and slashing.
Already better than sickle and 5e.
For one-handed, not light, so one-handed normal melee weapons. The categories are light melee weapons, one-handed melee weapons, two-handed, and ranged. So for one-handed, we've got clubs, which do also daggers in. Oh wow, that's actually worse than 5e, I think. Their thrown range in 3.5e is 10 feet.
That is worse than 5e.
One-handed weapons, club does a d6 double damage on a crit, has a throwing range of 10 feet.
Throw a stick at him.
Yeah. Heavy mace does a d8 bludgeoning damage, 2 times damage on a crit. Morningstar does a d8 damage, 2 times damage on a crit. Can do bludgeoning or piercing. You can pick. That's something that I think I would like to see in 5e again as well too, is weapons that you could pick which damage you want to do with them.
That
Short
goes back to our
spear-
first episode of just damage types in general being more
Oh,
prevalent.
Pertusa, you'll love this one.
Yeah.
There's 2 types of spears. One-handed melee is a short spear, which does guess what?
What?
A d6 and times 2 damage on a critical and has a throwing range of 20 feet.
Okay.
There's a long spear in 2-handed melee weapons, which does a d8 times 3 damage on a critical.
That's what I'm talking about.
I dig
That's the spear. You stab someone critically, it's gonna hurt.
A quarterstaff, which has the double weapon feature because you can whack people with both sides of it.
Yeah.
It does d6 for both sides, does 2 times critical. And then a spear, which is different than a long spear.
Mm-hmm.
Weighs less, does the same damage, same critical, but has a throwing range of 20 feet as well.
That's what I'm talking about. More spear representation in D&D.
And this is all the simple weapons too. We haven't even gotten to the martial weapons yet.
True.
Ranged weapons, heavy crossbow does a d10, crits on 1920 times 2 crit. Light crossbow crits on 1920 times 2 crit, does a d8, has a shorter range. Darts, d4. I think it's the same as 5e. D4 times 2 crit, 20-foot range. Javelins do a d6, 30-foot range.
There.
Martial weapons. I feel like this has been going on for a while.
Here. Levi, you look through that table and find the real rock stars of that table. I'm gonna ask Jordan a question while you're looking and perusing.
Okay.
Yes.
So, we've talked about all the weapons, and Jordan, we've talked about like our problems with the system and all this. And I knew we were going to eventually get to this point, but tell me, out of the D&D weapons list, out of the available like weapon types, which one has got to be your favorite aesthetic-wise?
Rapier, because pirate. That's I feel like because you can do the handles are so pretty. Not that you can't do cool stuff with like long sword handles and short sword handles, but I just love like the swirly guards. That's the rogue that I'm playing for campaign 3. I took I took a lot of time designing their sword because it has sentimental meaning, but also just because like it looks so fucking cool. So yeah, flavor wise, rapiers all the way. They're just so elegant.
They're cool. I'll admit, people at home, again, I have the Parks and Rec community. I have, what was the one from last episode that's going to kill me now? The Yo Gabba Gab heads.
Yeah, gabbites. The Yo Gabba Gabbites.
I'm going to have the rapier fans coming after me because I got to admit, I don't like it. But I don't really have a good reason for not liking it. The real reason that I don't like it is just that it's so used. It's so present.
I can understand that it's overdone.
A lot of people use it, and a lot of people are like, it looks so cool. And it also does a D8, so it does more damage than a spear, which makes me sad. But a lot of people use it. It's the best mechanically for some builds, and it's the coolest looking. So I'm just frustrated with it. My absolute favorite aesthetically, it's a tough call. The martial weapons are the ones I think are typically going to be cooler. Of course, you got to love a Warhammer because it's very funny to just beat somebody over the head with a hammer. But
this is true. You would know.
I would know. I think that my favorite, for pure aesthetic and not for usability, I'm going to give it to the Lance.
Lances are pretty badass. I will agree with that.
It's only the second 5e weapon out of all of them, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, I'm not sure. That does a d12 of damage. Granted, Lance has a lot of things wrong with it mechanically, but it's just so cool. So imagine, so like the Cavalier fighter, they got their bonus for being on horseback or on mounts and all that, and they could probably use a lance effectively. But just imagine a Hexblade Warlock, and their packed weapon is a lance.
Oh my god, I love that. It'd
be so cool. Or a Forge Cleric wielding a lance that they bless and turn into, what is that? The really hot metal, heat metal.
Yeah. Oh, that would be so cool.
Heat metal lance, or there's just a plethora of things you could do that when you do it with a sword, it's like, okay, I've seen this in a movie before. It's kind of cool, but a lance would be really funny.
Okay, what I want to see, speaking of the lance, what I want to see in D&D is somebody do, have you seen A Knight's Tale?
Yes.
It's been a while, the lance from The Knight's Tale with the false end.
Yeah.
I feel like would be so cool to have in a D&D fight. Just like because like but have a mechanic of like because the if you haven't seen the Knight's Tale, this isn't spoilers because it's like 20 years old. At the end the villain has a lance with a breakaway tip that reveals a sharp tip that ends up like gravely injuring the protagonist.
Yeah.
So I think it would be very cool to have a weapon like that where it's like you have to replace the tips, but every combat like it's like a round counter thing where like once you get to round 5 it breaks and instead of doing like bludgeoning damage it now does piercing damage.
That would be very cool.
I feel like that would be really, really cool.
Lances are really untapped potential. I think we need Twitter, do your thing, normalize lances in D&D more. Levi, how's the search for some heavy hitters going?
Well, 2 particularly heavy hitters that I've found so far: the heavy pick and the scythe.
Okay.
The heavy pick does a d6 damage, piercing damage. I'm assuming it's just like a pickaxe because it's not a war pick; it's a pick. A heavy pick.
A character using pickaxes. I feel like I've seen that before.
It does
Minecraft.
4 times critical damage.
Oh,
4
times critical damage.
damn!
It is the one of 2 that in this table that does 4 times critical damage. The other one is the scythe, which does
Nice.
2d4 damage.
That's a weird damage die. I
That's
kind of
4
love
times
it.
critical damage, piercing or slashing. The heavy pick is just piercing. But there's also an entire. There's also, you know how there's simple weapons and martial weapons in 5e. There's an entire other weapon class
Yeah,
in 3.5e, exotic weapons.
that's right.
And in the exotic weapons, you got stuff like specifically like certain dwarven weapons or orc weapons, things that like have been
Oh.
specifically made for a purpose. You got the gnome hooked hammer,
What'd you call me?
which is the one that was used for the example because it has 2 heads and one does 3 times damage and one does 4 times damage on a crit.
That's
Ooh.
cool.
That's very cool.
And the one that does 3 times damage on a crit does a d8, and the one that does 4 times damage on a crit does a d6.
There's so much strategery going on with the weapon choice. Look at this. Why didn't these make it out into any of the 5e existing source
I
books?
don't
Long
know.
swords in 5e crit on a 19 and 20. They do the same damage. Or in 3.5e, they crit on a 19-20. Also, shields do damage in 3.5e.
Bro.
That's one thing I wish that we had in 5 because you have to have a feat to use shields for anything other than shielding.
But get this.
Mhm.
Get what damage die they do. Guess.
D4?
No.
No.
6.
D3.
Oh.
That's so gross.
They do a D3 bludgeoning damage. But you can also get a spiked shield that does a D4 piercing damage.
Ooh, I like that.
Imagine shield does 2d3 damage.
Oh, I was wrong. There is another one that does 4 times damage. The light pick, which is a D4 and it does 4 times damage.
Dang. So
It's
when they
just light.
designed the weapons for 3.5e, they looked at Phineas Gage and they said that's what a critical hit should look like.
There's
'Cause
also
all the picks.
There's also 2-bladed swords in the exotic, which are just a long sword but 2 blades on it. There's bastard swords, which do
Yeah.
a D10. A whip, which does, get this, a D3 cubed damage.
Wait.
Okay, I actually don't hate that.
So it can do 1, 8, or 9 damage.
Yep.
I don't hate it.
That's very interesting. I don't know how I feel about that spread being 1, 8, and 9.
That's what I'm reading on the table, unless that's like one of those things where it's a footnote thing.
I'm gonna
that's
read if
what-
it's a footnote.
That's why the 3 is there. I don't know if it is a footnote though.
I say we
Because
go with
also-
it cubed.
Because also the 3 is by the small version of the weapon as well, which does a D2 cubed
Mm.
damage.
So 1 or 8. I'm bewildered. I don't. Indiana Jones is cubed.
I like the flavor of whips, but they don't work functionally. That's the issue. Like there are so many weapons in D&D, but some of them it's just not worth taking because you're not gonna do anything with them.
Exactly.
Also, there are different kinds of longbows and short bows in 3.5e.
Mhm.
There are regular ones which have 100-foot range, and then there's the composite versions, which have
Okay.
longer range. It makes sense because that's how it works in the real world. Although I'm not sure for longbows actually, because I think they're too big to make into composite. So that might be more of a fantasy thing.
Episode
Um,
1000, we make our own composite longbow. NFT.
I'm trying to see if there are any other weapons that do like cube damage. Yeah, there's this one called Sap. It's just called Sap,
Super auto pets?
and it does a d6 cubed bludgeoning damage.
D6 cubed?
I
Yeah.
can't do math. Somebody else figure that out.
That can get up to 216 damage on a 6.
Shiny.
There's no way.
It might be a footnote.
That cannot. Oh my god. You get to 4 cubed and you're already hitting 64 when you roll a 4. That you can't.
Well,
I
it
love
might
it.
be sap like in the sense of sapping, like explosion. That might be what it means.
So hold on. One.
Well, let me go find it. Let me because
Yeah.
there's descriptions for all of them down at the bottom.
The spread on that would be 1, 8, 9, 64, 125, and then 216. That's the spread.
I want to do 216 damage in a turn.
Yeah,
I can't
roll a
find it.
6,
It's not down here. It's not down here.
Oh
It's-
my gosh. Okay.
I found the
please.
footnote. It is footnotes. It was
Ah.
incorrect.
Dang
For
it.
3, the weapon deals non-lethal damage rather than lethal damage.
Oh, so the whip
Mm.
can't kill.
Yeah.
That's
and the
lame.
sap. So the small whip does 1 or 2 damage, and then the big whip does 1, 2, or 3 damage.
Obviously,
Yes.
they've never seen Indiana Jones.
But yeah, we got.
Ooh.
Let me just try to find like a weapon that
Scared
because
me.
the properties aren't listed anywhere under the weapons on the table, but they have all these extensive descriptions down below that I can read one of them. So a flail or a heavy flail.
Like
With a flail, this is just because it is a flail. You get a
Pretty
+2
good.
bonus on opposed attack rolls made to disarm an enemy.
Makes sense. Flails are.
You
This
can
is what
also
we're
use this
talking about.
weapon to make trip attacks.
Look at that.
I like that. I like that.
That goes back to when
Um,
we were really hyped about the what was that rule? The
Cold
targeted
shots?
attacks.
Cold shots, yeah.
Yeah. Where it's like targeting where you were going to attack, which
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
I still think is really cool. I just don't think it. I don't know if 5e lends itself to the system that we found, that
Mhm.
online one.
Well, I mean,
And
you
then
would
you
know
got-
you used it the most out of anybody.
Yeah.
And then
I
you got
think-
like gauntlets. Oh, go ahead.
I was just thinking, I think that a called shots system should totally exist, but I think the one that we found is not the best for it because it can be a little broken.
Then you got gauntlets. This metal glove lets you deal lethal damage rather than non-lethal damage with unarmed strikes.
I
A
love
strike with a
it.
gauntlet is otherwise considered an unarmed attack. Spiked gauntlets, your opponent cannot use a disarm action to disarm you of spiked gauntlets.
Shiny.
Also cool.
Halberd, if you use a ready action to set a halberd against a charge, you deal double damage on a successful hit against a charging character.
Just double damage. If you double damage and then like you did the ready and then you crit on the attack too,
Yep.
that's quadruple damage. Oh,
Lance. The lance deals double damage when used from the back of a charging mount.
there she is. I should
It has
call her.
reach, but you can't use it against an adjacent foe. While mounted, you can wield a lance with one hand.
I feel
Lance.
okay. I feel like you could use it against an adjacent foe because you could just clothesline people.
Dunk,
That's
dunk,
it.
dunk,
Doesn't
dunk.
necessarily do damage, but you do get knocked prone. Because if you get hit in the windpipe with a lance, you're gonna hit the floor.
Little do you know, all the enemies had their windpipes surgically removed right before the fight.
Then okay, then we're not fighting enemies. Then.
Ah,
It's-
okay. Here's where the composite is different from the regular.
Yeah.
All composite bows are made with a particular strength rating.
Oh,
If your strength bonus is less than the rating of the bow, you can't effectively use it, so you take a -2 penalty to attacks with it.
uh-huh.
The default requires a strength of +0 or higher to use with proficiency. It can be made with a higher strength rating to take advantage of an above average strength score. This feature allows you to add your strength bonus to damage
See, look
up
at
to the
that.
maximum bonus indicated for the bow.
I feel like that's somehow based around because I might be wrong because I'm not
So
like
you
a
can add
weapons
dex
expert.
and strength bonus to the bow.
But like, aren't composite bows like in the real world? Aren't composite bows like harder to draw because you require
Yes.
more pounds of force to draw a composite bow?
Yes,
That
that
makes
is
sense.
exactly correct. Yes, that is exactly what it is. Long spear. You can't use it. Okay, so I'm sensing with the reach weapons, the ruling in 3.5 is you can't use it against adjacent foes. You have to be facing them.
Yeah.
Like every weapon has a thing to it, a special thing that it does.
that relates to
makes
the
it
weapon.
yeah, that makes it different and makes you look at it and be like, do I want to use this Morningstar or this longsword? Because they both do like the same damage die. But longsword crits on a 19 and a 20. But a Morningstar might let me see if the Morningstar does anything special. I don't know.
It wakes me up.
No, it makes
think-
great veggie burgers.
That's right.
Was the Morningstar the one that it can do bludgeoning or piercing? It has 2 different damage types that you can pick from with it. So that's its thing.
Yeah. So that's the takeaway that we've learned from 3.5e weapons compared to 5e. I mean, the weapon list is just so drastically different. There's so much more in 3.5e.
Yeah.
And they all also feel pretty unique. A lot of them have similar bonuses, like the defense against charge or the bonus against unarming. But still, I feel like, yeah, I use my flail to disarm them. Feels way different than saying, yeah, I use my nunchucks to disarm them. There's not even a nunchucks thing in 5e officially.
Oh, if there were, Taryn would be all over that.
Oh my gosh, it would be so
Every
cool.
character that Taryn ever played would have nunchucks. It would be that and the immovable rod would be his entire bag.
Okay, so Jordan, I gotta know.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, Wizards of the Coast puts you directly in charge of the next weapon.
Ooh.
For some reason, Wizards is coming out with one new weapon, and that's it. And they're never making another one ever again.
Oh goodness.
And it's not like, a magical weapon. I mean, a weapon type. What one are you adding into 5th edition?
I don't know. I want to say for Taryn's sake, nunchucks, but I'm not going to say that. Okay, this could either be a very stupid answer or a very interesting answer. So when we were kids, the lightsaber toys that you would have to flick, like the baton,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I feel like that would be an interesting bludgeoning weapon, especially for a rogue flavor-wise. Like a baton.
Yeah.
Because kneecaps.
Extendable baton.
Extendable baton. Well, because if you had that, then you could. I feel like that could impose some kind of dexterity impediment or something if you hit people the right way. Because if you knock people off your feet with those, I feel like that would be a very interesting addition as like a not stabby weapon, but just like I feel like that would be cool. I think that would be very neat.
I like the extendable property you're talking about because we don't get into it a lot, but it almost feels like a lot of these weapons were designed with the intent that you wouldn't be able to carry them in your games all the time, like a fancy party or you get kidnapped or something.
That's why we have such bad luck at fancy parties.
Yeah. The extendable baton, slip it in your pocket or your sleeve or something. When the fighting breaks out at the fancy party, start taking kneecaps.
Well, and also from a role play aspect as well, that would just be so cool to describe because it always looks so cool in movies when they do stuff like that, where you just flick it out and it's that I think that would look very cool.
I am totally, if our extendable baton comes out, I'm playing as a probably neutral good paladin, and I am totally going to smite that baton, and I'm definitely going to have the soldier background, and now I'm just a police officer or a mall cop, and I get the baton. And
I want to see a mall cop paladin.
Paul Blart coming soon, subclass.
Oh my goodness. But no, I think that would be very cool as I feel like it might have the finesse property because I feel like it would definitely be dexy.
Yeah. Dex, bludgeoning. I don't think there's I don't know if there are any of those in 5.
There you go. Well, I feel like we need to make this now and somebody needs to use it because now I want to use this.
What about you, Levi? Same scenario. Wizards hands you the keys. What weapon you making?
I don't know. What I think?
You're the history major. You got more options in the mind, I'm sure.
I mean, I'm looking through M5E. We got a wide selection in 5e. It's just that they're not well balanced with each other is the problem. So I'm not sure what I would add, honestly, because if we're talking from just a straight medieval standpoint, we've mostly got the entire gang here already. I mean, we even got a net, for God's sake. Why is the pike 18 pounds?
Because she's a gnome.
Haha. That was the most terrifying laugh I've ever heard. How about that as a weapon?
A gnome?
No! Laugh.
When is a door ajar?
Fuck. No, wait, that's when is a door ajar. Fuck. When is a door ajar? Damn it.
Context for that will come in a later episode. This is called foreshadowing.
We're very stupid. That's the reasoning.
What? I mean, I don't know so much if I would want to add a brand new weapon into the mix. I like the idea of returning back to the 3.5 idea of different types of weapons. So like spear, there's a long spear and a short spear, not just a spear. Or in terms of like, I don't freaking know. I mean, stuff like that. I'm more for weapon variation. I think that the idea is there already, because I would say that the baton could just be a reflavored like mace or club, because it's just a club that you're like, yeah, also you can conceal it because it's a baton, and I know as the DM it's a baton, and you know as the player it's a baton. I think the foundation for it all is there, and it's good. It's just they did the thing that they did with everything in 5e. They oversimplified it. So I want them to go back. Do it over. Go back to the version I think is cooler.
There's the meme. Upgrades to 5e. Go back.
Yeah. That one's going to be coming out on the Twitter probably.
Okay. So Jordan raises the baton. Levi passes with a weapon overhaul or weapon system overhaul. I raise you both the bola.
As in the virus?
No, the bola.
Bola. What is a bola? Oh.
It's pretty cool.
What?
That's in 3.5.
There's a lot of weapons from like non-European history that I think aren't fully accounted for. Bola is definitely the biggest one, which is mostly South American, Central American history.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It's the net, but instead of being 5 feet or 15 feet, it's probably 30, 60 feet.
Yeah.
It's 3 weighted things, like 3 weighted balls connected by one chain. You swing it around, throw it at an enemy, catch their feet, boom, tied together, weighted down.
Oh, it's like the thing that John Constantine does with the horseshoes.
Maybe. I don't know what TJ does with his characters and his horseshoes.
That's not what I meant.
Bolas are, in fact, in 3.5e. You use them to make a ranged trip attack against an opponent.
See? I don't think that those are weapons to replace your main DPS. Like the fighter is not going to forsake their greatsword for the bola. But
That would be cool for like a one-off thing, like once per combat. I'm assuming that you would have to go and get it back and use it again.
I think it's just like a secondary thing, right? Like, so fighters get javelins, and oftentimes people, or not even just fighters, but there's a lot of people when you're making your character and you choose your equipment, and it'll be like, start with what weapon, or start with or any simple, any martial, and then there's always like, and then also get this weapon. I don't know about you, but every time I see that, I'm like, I'm never going to use these daggers that I just got, these 2 free daggers. Give the fighter some bolas, so that way if they can't catch up against like a monk-like enemy or just a really fast enemy, throw the bola.
Put them on the ground, yeah.
Yeah. It's not meant to be a DPS weapon, is what I'm trying to say. Utility.
They got more. 3.5 is just better.
It's just...
Thanks, Dad.
Better.
That's what he's been saying. He's come around. He's come around to 5e a little bit. He has conceded that some stuff in 5e is cool, but he's definitely still a 3.5 and Pathfinder purist.
I've never even played 3.5, and I am. I'm sitting here reading 3.5 stuff, and I'm like, that sounds so much more fun.
Okay. So we've talked about weapons we'd like to see, and we've talked about our favorite weapons and stuff like that, and the difference between 3.5 and 5e. Okay. Now, what's just like your favorite weapon as portrayed in fictional media in general? What's like your favorite thing in a thing that, like, in a piece of fiction that you're like, that looks sweet, that looks cool. I would love to have the feel of playing with that in D&D just at all.
Well, you know what my answer is going to be.
Gun.
No.
I have one. I have one.
Oh wait, Levi probably first.
Yeah, Levi
do
first.
you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Longsword. Friggin', I love swords. Swords are cool and awesome, which is funny because they're not the most efficient weapon in actual history. Swords were more of a decorative thing in history and were to show that you had the money to waste on a weapon that wasn't going to be as effective as a spear in combat, because you could use all the extra metal to make a much longer piece of metal that was pointy and also sharp on the sides that you probably weren't ever going to use because you're a noble who's going to sit at the back of the battle until it's over. But yeah, I just love, which again, that goes back to my whole Lord of the Rings was my introduction to fantasy and all that, because you got you got Anduril, Flame of the West, which is this awesome sword that the king gets this awesome sword, and that's the proof of his birthright, right? He gets this amazing, cool sword that's name literally means Flame of the West. And you've also got Arthurian legend, you've got Excalibur. That's the probably most well-known sword of all time, which is like the founding myth of the cool sword. Whosoever shall pull this sword from the stone shall become the king of all England. So I love swords.
All
I
right.
like the idea and the myth surrounding swords.
Swords are pretty cool. They've definitely extended into the realm of modern day and the representation of fiction a lot. What about you, Jordan?
Okay, so I have like a very specific kind of sci-fi named example. I want the Tesla from Warehouse 13.
What does that do?
Okay, it is a ray gun, but it's steampunk. Because the entire thing, if you haven't watched, I know you guys haven't watched Warehouse 13, but if the listeners haven't watched Warehouse 13,
Watchers.
Go watch it. There are no watchers. Go watch Warehouse 13. It is for free on IMDb TV. We are not sponsored, but I think everyone should watch it. So go watch it. But the entire point is that the warehouse collects historical artifacts that are imbued with magic power through events and histories and stuff. And one of the things that warehouse agents use to accomplish this goal and to get these artifacts is they use these things called Teslas, which are steampunk ray guns invented by Nikola Tesla, either invented by Nikola Tesla or the technology of Tesla coils is what's used for it. I can't remember the specifics because it's been a hot second since I've done a rewatch. But they can have a stun gun mode, and they also, I think they can outright kill people, but like the stun gun mode is cooler. And there are also like different things that they've done with the Teslas over the years, with like them interacting with artifacts in funky ways. It's just very cool. And also the steampunk aesthetic is perfect. That's like my favorite thing about Warehouse 13 is they have the Tesla and the Farnsworth, which are standard issue for warehouse agents, and they're both amazing.
That does sound very fun. I know that D&D necessarily isn't primed for that kind of stuff, but man, I do love a good Tesla coil and everything. If it's in a game, I take it.
Yeah.
My very favorite weapon in fictional material has got to be something I've always thought is like super cool. I've always thought it'd be wild if it was real, and it's hard to even wrap my head around it, but it would just be so cool to use it as a weapon. I've yet to actually be able to do it, because it's not real. But it's not even really in many games. It's gotta be the jellyfish.
What?
The jellyfish?
Like the animal?
Yeah. Like, think about it, okay? I know they're not real, they're SpongeBob, but you grab one and you can throw it at someone, or you can just like start like, I don't know, if you could immunize yourself to the jellyfish poison, just glue them on your hands and start punching people with the stingy end.
Are you going to tell him or should I?
I mean, what?
I'm not going to tell him.
Produce it.
Yeah.
Jellyfish are real?
In SpongeBob, maybe. If you were telling me they were real in real life, I'd probably have to die.
No, SpongeBob was made by
maybe we just I would agree. I think that jellyfish would be a really, really cool fantasy weapon.
No, SpongeBob was made by a marine biologist. Everything in it is a real fish in real life. Produce it.
Yeah, okay. So now you're going to tell me sponges are real and chicken while you're at it.
I use a sponge when I shower. I could go get it and show you right now, actually.
Impossible.
Wait, did you say chickens?
Chicken, singular. That would also be a cool weapon, don't you think? Like I've seen this one in a game before. You
Mhm.
hold the chicken butt
I-
towards the enemy,
I-
and then it shoots out eggs at a rapid pace.
The chicken. We had chickens on my property when I was younger. A fox ate all of them. But yeah,
That
no, chickens are really real. I remember this vividly.
that sounds like it would have been cool. I had a dream once when I was 4 that I had been taking care of chickens for several months for some reason, and then one day a dog came to where the chickens were and started making the chickens panic. So when I tried to save the chickens, they chased me and pecked me into oblivion and made me cry. That was probably just a dream, and it's definitely not a repressed memory making me believe that chickens never existed.
I was about to say, is that why you don't believe chickens are real?
They're not, silly. They're as real as jellyfish.
I have a picture of a jellyfish on my phone from where I found one in Florida on Florida Beach. It it's weird seeing one like in real life with your eyes because you're like, wow, they actually like they look like Jello
Mhm.
in real life, and it's Jello that if I touch it would hurt really bad.
Hi, this is Jordan from Nat One Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode you just listened to, and we hope that you come back for more soon. If you'd like to keep up with the zany shenanigans of our lives and the different things that we do, you can find us on Twitter, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, Castbox, and Anchor. We look forward to seeing you again soon. And hey, thanks.